So I've now got up to the 18th Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool. To give him his full name, Robert Jenkinson, the second Earl of Liverpool, or Robert Banks Jenkinson, second Earl of Liverpool. Now he's notable for the length of time he was in office, some 14 years, which ranks as the third longest ministers are known by the first lords of the treasury, I should say, are known by titles. So when I say Liverpool, I'm not talking about the city, but the man, Robert Jenkinson. At this time, we didn't really know prime ministers as Robert Jenkinson, but rather Liverpool, Newcastle, etc. So this is from 10 Downing Street. This is a quote. I consider the right of election as a public trust, granted not for the benefit of the individual, but for the public good. Robert Banks Jenkinson, Earl of Liverpool, became known for repressive measures introduced to restore order, but he also steered the country through the period of radicalism and unrest which followed the Napoleonic Wars. A lot of his tenure oversaw Luddite riots, Swing riots, Rebecca riots. These were all measures against the Industrial Revolution, or I should say events reacting against the Industrial Revolution. He served as leaders for the House of Lords, Foreign Secretary and War Secretary. After the assassination of Spencer Perceval in 1812, the Earl of Liverpool was asked to form a government. He also oversaw the period of Regency and the time when George IV was king, which was a relatively short period. Few expected him to survive in office very long, as at first his government seemed very insecure. But the opposition provided by the Whig Party was weak and disunited, and he was able to draw on the talents of individuals such as Sidmouth, as former Henry Addington, the Duke of Wellington, Castlereagh, and Canning. These are some of the leading statesmen of that period. The end of the Napoleonic Wars with France in 1815, aided by the Duke of Wellington's victory in the field, further boosted support for Lord Liverpool. But after the war, unrest broke out at home, partly caused by an economic recession that started in 1817. Unemployment, a bad harvest, and high prices produced riots and protests. Actions such as the repeal of the income tax and the creation of the Corn Laws tended to make the situation worse. Lord Liverpool's government reacted by suspending habeas corpus for 2 years, which meant he essentially behaved like a dictator. Things became even worse in summer 1819, when large gatherings in favour of parliamentary reform culminated in a massive public meeting in Manchester on the 16th of August that year. Soldiers attacked the crowds, killing at least 11 and wounding many more. Some figures cite the number at 15. The shocking event became known as the Peterloo Massacre. It was named after Peterloo Field in Manchester. Liverpool, I should say, by the way, there were actually massacres later on, such as those at Newport, and in Bristol, which were even worse than the Peterloo massacre, but they aren't as well documented. Um, Lord Liverpool's following 6 acts limited the right to hold radical meetings. This crackdown on liberty prompted an attempt by radicals in 1820 to murder Lord Liverpool and his cabinet. That was called the Cato Street Conspiracy and start a radical revolution. The Cato Street Conspiracy proved unsuccessful, and the conspirators were hung. Pardon me, I'm just reading down here. The conspirators were. Oh, oh dear, I've lost my track. Bear with me a second, please. Just lost the page. That's somewhat frustrating. So anyway, you're getting the idea that this was a very tense time. Apologies. So the conspirators of the Cato Street Conspiracy were hung or transported. During the 1820s, Lord Liverpool's policy became increasingly liberal and a period of economic prosperity began. He also returned Britain to the gold standard in 1819. The anti-trade union laws were repealed and many trading restrictions were removed. A stroke forced him to resign in 1827 and he died the following year. So the impression we get here from Lord Liverpool is that the first sort of half of his tenure was very harsh and repressive. The second half was more liberal. Take from that what you want. Um, Major acts during his time was the Importation Act of 1815, prohibiting the import of foreign wheat until the domestic price reached a minimum accepted level. Um, and he was only 58 when he died. He died in Kingston upon Thames, now in London. So he was one of the younger prime ministers when he passed away. But I think it's fair to say that Lord Liverpool is one of our more controversial prime ministers. I guess you can make analogies with Margaret Thatcher in the sense that he was a very divisive figure. Some historians would argue his measures were necessary, others would say they were repressive and dictatorial. To take it from what you want. To me, a lot of that can never be condoned, but we also need to look at the more liberal reforms of the second half of his tenure. So that is our 18th Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool.